Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of absolute clinical precision. Like it feels like engineering.
Right, it's very binary.
Exactly. You fall off your bike, your arm hurts, you go to the hospital, and they put you in front of an X-ray machine.
Mm-hmm.
And a few minutes later, the doctor pulls up that stark black and white image on a glowing screen, points to a very specific jagged white line, and says, well, there it is.
Broken or not broken, it's clean. The tool doing the diagnosing, like the X-ray machine itself, is entirely separate from the thing being diagnosed, which is your arm.
Yeah.
And if there is a flaw in the machine, a technician can just open it up, look at the literal nuts and bolts, and fix it.
And I think that separation is deeply comforting to us.
Yeah.
We inherently like things to be visible, to be neatly categorized, and to have a clear mechanical chain of cause and effect. We want a world where we can point to the problem and say, look, I see it right there.
We do. We absolutely do.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Because the moment you step out of the hospital and into the world of human perception, into the architecture of how we actually make meaning on a daily basis, suddenly that clean X-ray machine just shatters.
Completely shattered.
We are no longer looking at a crisp black and white image. We are looking at a diagnostic landscape that is entirely murky.
It is the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters. And the reason for that murkiness is a profound paradox that, honestly, most of us go our entire lives without ever acknowledging.
Right.
The machine we are using to examine the problem of perception is the exact same machine that is causing the problem.
Which is wild.
Yeah.
Our mind is literally trying to diagnose our own mind.
Yes.
You are using your perception to evaluate the flaws in your perception, which is it's a dizzying concept to wrap your head around.
Mm-hmm.
But that is exactly where we are starting today.
It is.
Because right now, your mind is diagnosing itself.
Sure.
And our mission in this deep dive is to look completely under the hood of your mind's operating system.
We are going to explore the hidden mechanics of how human minds construct reality before we even consciously act. We are looking at the blueprints of interpretation. So things like the frameworks of visual epistemology, the profound power of sorting systems, and the underlying parameters of how we deduce what is actually real.
And the promise here, the hook for you listening right now, is that by the end of this conversation, you are going to learn how to stop being a passive resident inside your own head.
Exactly.
You are going to learn the tools like linear reality deduction and the 4 parameters, or the 4DP, to become the active conscious architect of your own meaning.
But before we cross that threshold, though, we do need to set a very clear stage regarding the material we are unpacking today.
Yeah, that's important.
Because to understand cognitive architecture, we have to look at how it operates in the real world, not just in a, sterile laboratory. That means we will be examining some very heavy, very real societal examples. Things like race, policing, municipal bureaucracy, historical inequality, and economics.
Right, because that's where these internal sorting systems actually have the highest stakes.
Exactly. But it is crucial to state clearly to you, the listener, that our purpose here is not to endorse any specific political ideology, whether left-wing or right-wing.
Yeah, we're not here to take sides on policy, to debate the morality of specific politicians, or to preach about what laws should be passed. That's not the goal of this deep dive.
No, not at all. We're simply here to impartially unpack the mechanics of human interpretation. We are using these real-world examples strictly as a lens. It's a way to make the invisible cognitive machinery visible. We just want to see how humans sort the world.
So let's dive into that machinery. I want to start with a phrase that is probably one of the most universally used conversation enders in human history.
Oh, I know the one.
Yeah. I use it, you use it, everyone listening uses it. I saw it with my own eyes.
The ultimate trump card.
It is the ultimate mic drop in an argument. You can present me with statistics, you can present me with historical context, but if I say, well, I saw it with my own eyes, the debate is just over. Why do we do that? Why is our visual cortex treated as the unquestionable, ultimate proof of reality?
What's fascinating here is that vision offers us something that human thought desperately, almost biologically, longs for, and that is immediacy.
Immediacy.
Yes. When you see something, the cognitive loop closes instantly. It also offers shareability, like, if we are standing next to each other, I can point at a tree and you see the exact same tree. It offers supreme confidence, and most importantly, it offers a profound relief from ambiguity.
Relief from ambiguity. Because, ambiguity takes mental calories to process, and our brains are naturally lazy.
Precisely. Now, it is undeniably true that vision is indispensable. Evolutionarily speaking, we need it for real-time spatial navigation.
Right, to not bump into things.
Exactly. We need it for physical coordination, to calculate distance, to notice contrast, and to avoid immediate physical danger. If a car is hurtling towards you, you don't need a philosophical framework to step out of the way. You just need your eyes.
So the eyes are doing their job. They're keeping us alive.
They are. But the catastrophic failure of visual epistemology begins the exact moment we confuse that baseline necessity with epistemological sufficiency.
Okay, let me make sure I've got this. Meaning, just because I need my eyes to keep from walking into an intersection, that doesn't mean my eyes are actually capable of understanding how the traffic system was engineered or who funded it or why the crosswalk is in the wrong place to begin with.
That is the perfect distinction. Sight is conceptually shallow. It registers the surface of reality. It registers scale. It registers movement. It registers spatial relations. But look at what sight absolutely cannot do. Sight cannot reveal motive. It cannot reveal the causal history that produced the visible moment in front of you.
Wow.
It cannot reveal hidden structural mechanisms or what a system distributes over time to the people who move through it. You can have high-definition 4K, crystal-clear access to a situation, and yet still possess incredibly low-depth truth about what is actually happening.
Okay, I hear what you were saying structurally, but I have to push back here. Just playing devil's advocate for a second.
Go for it.
Isn't seeing believing for a reason? Like, let's ground this. If I am walking through an unfamiliar city, and I turn down a street, and I look at a neighborhood, well, let's say I see cracked sidewalks, broken windows, trash on the street, and people standing on corners not moving with the rhythm of commerce I'm used to.
Okay.
I know what that is. The physical evidence is right there in front of my face. It is a decaying, chaotic, potentially dangerous place.
My eyes aren't lying to me about the broken glass.
Your eyes are not lying to you about the physical presence of the silica that makes up the broken glass. That's true. But what is the it that you claim to be knowing? You said, I know what that is. It's decay. It's chaos.
Yeah, based on the visual evidence. But decay and chaos are not visual artifacts. They are interpretations. The eye only sees cracked brick. It only sees people occupying space in a novel way. The conclusion, the verdict of danger or chaos, is a massive cognitive leap.
But isn't it a logical leap? Like, broken windows usually mean nobody's caring for the building.
Let's examine that logic. What looks like a decayed neighborhood to an outsider taking a quick 3-second visual scan might actually be a community operating with an incredibly dense, invisible network of mutual care.
Right.
It might be a neighborhood full of deep historical resilience where neighbors watch out for each other's children, share resources, and maintain complex social bonds. But that neighborhood might be suffering from 3 decades of invisible, long-term infrastructural abandonment by the municipality, or predatory lending policies that make home repair financially impossible.
So the eye just notices the cracked block, and because it can't see the predatory lending policy from, like, 1995, the mind just skips over the unseen history and immediately jumps to, the people here don't care. This is a bad place.
Exactly. The eye opens the door, but the mind furnishes the room with inherited maps. When you say, I saw it with my own eyes, the deeper, much more uncomfortable question you have to ask yourself is, through what pre-existing map was that scene being made legible to me?
Oh, that's good.
Because the visible world never, ever enters a neutral interpretive field in your brain. It lands in a mind that is already heavily furnished by societal categories, cognitive compressions, personal fears, and social rewards.
This connects perfectly to the first parameter we need to introduce to the listener today. We mentioned the 4DP earlier, the 4 parameters of navigating reality. They were target, truth, totally, and title.
Yes, the 40P.
And this exact problem, this visual bias, this jumping to conclusions based on a cracked sidewalk, is a fundamental failure of the truth parameter.
Yes. In this framework, truth is not just about avoiding deliberate lies. It's not like saying you didn't eat the last cookie when you did. Truth is about a brutal, radical self-honesty regarding the material reality of a situation. It demands strict fidelity to reality as it actually is, not what your inherited maps assume it to be, and not what you fear it to be.
So if we fail to recognize how heavily biased our vision is, if we walk down that street and think our 3-second visual scan of a cracked sidewalk gives us the total, objective reality of that community, we are failing the truth parameter.
We absolutely are.
We are effectively lying to ourselves about the coordinates of where we are even starting from.
And if your starting coordinates are wrong, every single navigational decision you make after that will lead you further into the woods. You are allowing the surface to impersonate the totality.
Let's take this deeper. Because if applying visual epistemology to a brick building is flawed, Applying it to a human being feels infinitely more complex. What happens when this visual failure is directed not at a neighborhood, but at a person?
This is where the failure of visual epistemology shifts from being a mere cognitive risk to a devastating social mechanism. When we apply this flawed visual sorting to human phenotypes, the results are profound.
Just to make sure we are all on the same page, phenotype refers to the observable physical properties of an organism: appearance, skin color, hair texture, facial structure, bodily presentation.
Correct. The physical visible traits. In this architectural framework, phenotype is often treated as what we can call misleading data.
Misleading data, okay.
Now, to be clear, it's not misleading because the physical features are hallucinations. You are actually seeing the hair texture or the skin tone. It is misleading because the inferential burden that the observer places upon those physical traits far, far exceeds their legitimate scientific or moral range.
So we take a purely physical trait and we use it as an anchor to drop a massive ship of assumptions.
Exactly. A visible trait ceases to be just a trait and magically transforms into an imagined archive of invisible information. Based on a glance, the observer's brain downloads a massive, completely unverified file regarding that person's moral character, their cognitive ability, their socioeconomic status, or their potential threat level.
And this happens incredibly fast, right? Like, we aren't standing there rubbing our chins, philosophically deducing someone's character over 20 minutes. It's instantaneous.
It is faster than conscious thought. It relies on what we can term the economy of affect. Affect meaning emotion or physical sensation. We feel a sudden sense of comfort or a sudden spike of suspicion or an immediate attraction before our reflective analytical brain even has a chance to boot up.
Wait, let me stop you there because this is where a lot of people listening might push back.
Okay.
People trust their gut. If I am walking to my car at night and I see someone and I get a sudden spike of suspicion, my stomach tightens, the hair on my arm stands up, isn't that my evolutionary survival instinct working perfectly? Isn't that my gut protecting me? You're saying I shouldn't trust that.
This raises a vital question about the origin of that gut feeling. Your nervous system is indeed reacting to protect you, but what is it reacting to?
To the person.
Well, we tend to pretend that the feeling itself is raw, unfiltered evidence. We say, something about him just felt off. Or on the flip side, she just seemed so articulate and trustworthy. We treat that somatic sensation as if it were an innocent, perfectly calibrated, objective reading of the universe.
But it's not.
No,
Yeah.
because that fast feeling, that effect, is riding inside those inherited visual maps we discussed earlier. Society tells the observer, over decades of media, historical narratives, and cultural conditioning, what specific physical features are supposed to mean.
Oh, wow.
The brain internalizes that coding. So when you see those features, your brain triggers the alarm or triggers the comfort. But the observer experiences that triggered meaning as if it naturally, organically radiated out from the person they are looking at.
That is incredibly subtle. So the social instruction completely disappears into the perception. I don't think I am judging you based on a biased societal map. I genuinely believe I am just organically perceiving your true nature.
Exactly. It operates invisibly. And this is the exact mechanism by which false hierarchies sustain themselves without ever needing malicious intent from every single individual. It operates with a profound structural asymmetry.
How so? What do you mean by asymmetry?
Think about the concept of the unmarked body versus the marked body. In any given visual regime or society, certain phenotypes are centered as the unmarked normality, the default setting.
Right.
People with these features get to stand for personhood itself. When they walk into a room, they are just viewed as individuals. Their physical appearance doesn't trigger a massive download of inherited assumptions.
They're just a blank canvas.
Yes. But the marked bodies, those whose phenotypes deviate from that centered default, have to carry an enormous extra narrative weight. Their physical appearance is not treated as individual, it is treated as a symbol for an entire category of people. They are forced to carry all the historical baggage, the stereotypes, and the preloaded inferences of the society's visual map.
So simply by existing visibly in a space, their body becomes a task they have to manage.
That is exactly it. The visible body becomes a task. The person encountered must now spend cognitive energy confirming, disconfirming, or strategically managing a visual reading that they did not author.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. They have to modulate their voice, adjust their posture, or carefully select their clothing just to neutralize the false narrative the observer's eye is forcing upon them. It is a massive, exhausting cognitive and emotional tax.
Which brings us perfectly to another pillar of the 40P framework, the title parameter. We talk about knownships in this architecture.
Yes, known ships.
A title is essentially the story you are living inside, the identity or the label you've taken on. I am manager, I am a father, I am an artist.
Yeah.
But the absolute core rule of the title parameter is that titles must be held without permanent binding.
Yes. Think of it like a brilliant actor changing roles. You might step onto the stage today in the mode of a hero, tomorrow as a mentor, and the next day as a sidekick. You fully inhabit the role while you were in it, but you do not become permanently, biologically stuck as the villain just because you played that part in one scene.
Right.
Non-ships recognize that most labels are transient functional states, not fixed, inescapable essences.
But when a society uses visual traits, when it uses a flawed visual epistemology to assign permanent, rigid identities to people, they are fundamentally violating that architectural rule. They are trapping people in titles. They look at a marked phenotype and they permanently tattoo a rigid title onto that person. Criminal, subordinate, genius, suspicious. And they do this based purely on a fast, effective visual read.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, you begin to see why this is so damaging. Holding your own identity lightly allows for fluid evolution, growth, and adaptability, but forcing a rigid title onto someone else based on their surface appearance is a catastrophic architectural failure of meaning. It completely collapses their multidimensional humanity into a single, unyielding fictional dimension.
So if our eyes are this easily compromised and our gut feelings are just running corrupted societal software, how do these labels actually take hold in the brain? Here's where it gets really interesting, because we have to transition from how we see the world to how we sort the world.
Yes, the leap to categorization.
We are moving from visual epistemology to the profound architecture of categories. And the core mind-bending argument here is that categories are not passive buckets.
That is the pivotal shift. We have been conditioned to think of categories purely as vocabulary. We view them as a helpful filing system, a way to organize the overwhelming amount of data in the world so our brains don't overheat. We think a category is just a neutral box we put things into after we've evaluated them.
Like, I have evaluated this object, he has 4 legs and barks, I will now place it in the dog bucket.
Right. But this framework insists that classification is not a passive filing system. It is an active, aggressive architecture. When you place a label or a category on something, you are not merely describing a world that already exists independently of you. You are prearranging the world. You are building the track before the train even arrives.
The blueprint analogy is so crucial here. Let's break down exactly how these blueprints work, because there are 4 specific tasks that every category performs the very microsecond it is activated in your brain. These are the 4 distributions. If you're listening, pay close attention to these, because this is where you realize how much of your daily reality is running on pure autopilot.
Let's walk through them. The first distribution is attention.
Okay.
The moment a category is applied, it immediately distributes your attention by violently highlighting certain pieces of data while actively hiding or muting others. It literally tells your mind what counts as valuable signal and what can be discarded as irrelevant noise.
Let's go back to our neighborhood street example to ground this. You're walking down the street and you see 3 teenagers spray painting a brick wall. If your mind has inherited the category of vibrant up-and-coming arts district for that street, your category distributes your attention to the specific colors they are using. It highlights their brushstrokes, their artistic technique, the blending of the paint. You are witnessing a mural being born. You might even stop to take a picture.
Exactly. The category instructs your eye on what to value.
But if your mind has inherited the category of dangerous, decaying neighborhood for that exact same geographic street, and you look at those exact same 3 teenagers holding the exact same cans of paint, making the exact same physical motions, well, your attention is distributed entirely differently.
It completely shifts.
The colors become noise. The technique is irrelevant. Your attention highlights the fact that they are young, that they are altering property, and that you are an outsider. The mural disappears, and vandalism appears. The category literally alters the physical tracking of your eyeballs.
It is a phenomenal mechanism, and it leads directly to the second distribution, permission. Once a category highlights the data, it instantly dictates what physical, social, or legal actions are permitted in response to that data. If the category is mural, the permitted action is to admire it or perhaps fund it. If the category is vandalism, the permitted action is to call the police or cross the street.
Which flows right into the third distribution, Exclusion. A category creates locked rooms of illegitimacy.
Yes, and this is where sorting systems begin to wield immense power. Exclusion tells you who or what fundamentally does not belong in a given space, both physically and conceptually.
How does that work in practice? Can you give an example of a category creating a locked room?
Consider something as seemingly bureaucratic as municipal zoning laws. A city planner draws a line on a map and categorizes a specific area as single-family residential only. That is a category.
Right.
Immediately, that category creates an exclusion. It legally locks out high-density housing, apartment buildings, or mixed-use development. By excluding those structures, you are mathematically excluding people who cannot afford a single-family mortgage. You have used an invisible conceptual category, a zoning label, to physically lock certain demographics out of that neighborhood and consequently out of the well-funded public schools located in that neighborhood.
Wow. So the category is quite literally acting as a bouncer at the door of reality. It's not a description, it's a mechanism of force.
And that mechanism is powered by the fourth and perhaps most cognitively dangerous distribution, inference. A category acts as highly compressed predictive code.
Compressed predictive code, like a ZIP file full of assumptions.
Precisely. Inference allows the mind to leap across gaps in actual knowledge. It says, because this subject belongs in this specific category, all these other traits must naturally follow. If you categorize someone as a Harvard graduate, your brain instantly inferences high intelligence, competence, and reliability, even if you have never seen a single piece of their actual work.
Right. It saves mental calories by preloading the interpretation,
Yeah.
but it is highly prone to massive systemic error.
I want to share the analogy that absolutely blew my mind when I first encountered this framework. It's so incredibly simple, yet it completely dismantles how we think about nature versus categories.
The dandelion.
Yes, the dandelion. Think about a weed in your front lawn. What is a weed? We talk about weeds as if they are a specific biological entity, but a weed is not a botanical family. There is no specific DNA sequence, no genetic marker that biologists look at under a microscope to declare a plant a weed. A weed is entirely 100% an architectural category that frames a specific human relationship to that plant.
It is a functional label, completely devoid of inherent botanical ontology. Right. The second you look at that dandelion and your brain applies the category weed, all four distributions fire instantly. Your attention highlights its contrast against your perfect green grass. The category grants you the permission to physically rip it out of the ground by its roots. It dictates the exclusion that this plant does not belong in this space. And it provides the inference that if you don't kill it today, it will aggressively spread and ruin your entire lawn.
Now, compare that to a different context.
Look.
If that exact same dandelion, with the exact same cellular structure, is growing in a wild meadow and you are on a nature walk, your brain categorizes it as wildflower.
Completely different set of distributions.
Yes. Suddenly, your attention highlights its bright yellow color. The permission shifts. You might let your child pick it to make a wish. The exclusion vanishes. It belongs there. And the inference is that it is a beautiful natural part of the ecosystem.
That's wild.
The plant did not change. Not one atom of the plant altered. The only thing that changed was the invisible blueprint of your category.
And just to hammer this home, think about a mouse. A tiny furry mouse inside a glass tank in a brightly lit pet store is categorized as a companion. You might pay $20 for it. You buy it little treats. But that exact same biological animal running across your kitchen floor at 2 in the morning is categorized as a pest. The category of pest instantly opens up a program of legitimate, justified extermination. The animal is identical. The category alone dictates the reality of your response.
But this raises a truly critical question. If our categories are this phenomenally powerful, if they dictate what we love, what we kill, who we fund, and who we arrest, how do we test them?
Exactly.
How do we determine which of our internal categories are grounded in objective reality and which are just abstract fictions we have invented and mutually agreed upon?
Enter my absolute favorite tool in this entire framework, linear reality deduction.
Linear reality deduction is a profound mechanism for clearing cognitive illusion. It is designed to force you to separate the symbolic, abstract layer of reality from the operational, physical layer of matter.
And the ultimate stress test for linear reality deduction is a thought experiment known as the Meteor test. I want you, the listener, to actually visualize this right now. It's intense, but it is incredibly clarifying.
Here is the scenario for the Meteor test. A massive billion-ton, hyperdense meteor has breached the atmosphere. It is hurtling toward Earth at 30,000 miles an hour, and it is going to impact your exact location in precisely 10 minutes. This is a physical inevitability.
Okay, the rock is coming.
The rock is coming. Now, the diagnostic question. Can your credit score stop the meteor?
No?
Can the Dow Jones Industrial Average, even if it's at a record high, reach up into the stratosphere and deflect it?
Of course not.
Can your job title, your university degree, the geopolitical borders drawn on a map, or your social prestige alter the physical trajectory of that rock by even 1 millimeter?
They absolutely cannot, because the rock does not care about the economy. The rock does not respect international borders.
Exactly. And why is that? Because abstractions, categories, titles, money, laws possess absolutely no independent physical force in the universe. Meaning is not matter. The abstraction completely ends where the physical machinery of the universe begins.
Okay, I love this, but I have to play devil's advocate here. Let me throw a major pushback at you, because the line between meaning and matter feels blurrier than that in real life.
Let's hear it.
What about stress? Let's say I have a massive project at work, and my boss gives me a completely arbitrary, fake, entirely abstract deadline. It's just a concept on a calendar. But I worry about that concept so much that it causes a very real, bleeding, physical ulcer in my stomach lining. An abstract concept literally burned a hole in my physical, biological tissue. Doesn't that explicitly prove that concepts and abstractions have real physical force?
It absolutely seems to, until you slow down and apply linear reality deduction to trace the granular sequential chain of interaction. Let's look closely at your ulcer. The concept of the deadline, the idea of Friday at 5 p.m. did not reach a ghostly abstract hand down your throat and physically carve a hole in your stomach.
Okay, true.
The deadline is purely conceptual code. But that abstract code is running on the very physical hardware of your biological brain. Your brain processes the abstraction. Your physical nervous system interprets the concept as a threat.
Right.
That physical nervous system then sends electrical signals to your physical adrenal glands. Your glands release physical cortisol and adrenaline into your bloodstream. That is matter. The physical acid in your stomach increases. That is matter. The physical acid physically burns the physical tissue.
Oh, I see. The extraction itself never touched the stomach.
Never. The abstraction only impacted physical reality through what we call material translation.
Material translation.
Yeah.
It dictated how your physical body organized its physical response.
Precisely. Abstractions do not act directly upon the physical universe. They only organize human action, and humans act materially. The concept of a border does not physically stop a person from walking. The physical guard with a physical weapon who believes in the concept of the border physically stops the person.
This is a massive paradigm shift.
If we fail to separate the meteor from the economy, if we delude ourselves into thinking our abstract wealth or our titles will magically repel the rock without the material translation of building a physical bunker out of concrete and steel, we die. The abstraction has zero power without the machinery of human physical implementation.
Okay, so we've firmly established that categories are these incredibly powerful internal blueprints, but they only have power when translated into material reality. But human beings don't just keep these blueprints locked inside their own heads, do they? We don't just privately categorize things in our living rooms.
No, we do not. And this is where we transition into the deep core of the concept of sorting systems. Human beings have a relentless drive to externalize their minds. We take our internal abstract categories and we forcefully carve them into the physical world.
Yeah.
We turn our invisible blueprints into visible infrastructure. We build laws, borders, passports, school districts, tax codes, and zoning maps. We make the categories concrete.
We build the architecture outward. And there's this incredible phenomena that happens when we do this. It's called administrative repetition. Honestly, this is the great magic trick of institutional life.
It is the mechanism that turns fiction into perceived reality. Administrative repetition works like this. When an arbitrary category is repeated enough times by official bureaucratic channels, it produces something called ontological confidence.
Ontological confidence, meaning it begins to feel like a deeply natural, unquestionable feature of the universe.
Yes. Think about filling out forms. If a specific category, let's say a specific racial classification or a specific tax bracket, appears on enough government forms in enough digital databases and requires enough official signatures to process, people simply stop asking where the category came from in the first place.
Right. It just becomes background noise.
The sheer, exhausting weight of navigating the bureaucracy makes the category feel undeniable. The system's relentless use of the category is mistakenly taken as definitive proof of the category's underlying truth.
What is recorded looks discovered. That specific line from the text hit me so hard. We think of a national census, for example, as just a giant mirror. We think a census just goes out, reflects the population exactly as it organically is, and reports back.
But a census does not merely reflect a population. A census dictates the exact terms of visibility. It chooses how people are allowed to be seen by the apparatus of power. If the census only gives you 4 boxes to check for your identity, those 4 boxes become the only legally recognized reality for the next decade. The complexity of millions of lives is violently compressed into 4 administrative buckets.
Or think about how this plays out in a school system. A school system does not merely observe and record innate natural talent in students. It often manufactures the very conditions under which talent is allowed to be recognized, encouraged, funded, or entirely ignored.
Exactly. A school uses categories like gifted and talented tracks versus remedial tracks. It sorts 7-year-olds into these categories based on early testing. It then pours immense resources, better teachers, and smaller class sizes into the gifted track while underfunding the remedial track.
Yeah.
Then, 10 years later, the administration looks at the massively divergent graduation rates and test scores and says, see, our initial categories were correct. The gifted kids succeeded and the remedial kids failed. It's natural.
They completely ignore the fact that the system itself manufactured the outcome. The system harvests exactly what it planted and then has the audacity to call the harvest nature.
This specific blindness, this refusal to see the system's role in creating the reality it claims to only be observing, ties directly into the third pillar of the 40P framework, the totally parameter.
Right. Totally is about dimensional homonymy, which sounds like a dense piece of sci-fi jargon, but it's actually a very practical concept. It's about completeness.
Let's break down dimensional homonymy. A homonym is a word that sounds the same but has multiple meanings, like bark on a tree versus the bark of a dog. Dimensional homonymy refers to the fact that things in reality have multiple overlapping layers or dimensions, but we tend to collapse them into a single flattened label.
The easiest way to think about this is a smartphone. If I hold up my device and call it a phone, I am using a dimensional homonym. It isn't just a phone. That is a massive underdescription. It is a high-resolution camera, a global GPS tracker, a supercomputer, a digital wallet, and a portal to the entire internet. But if I just lazily call it a phone, I mentally collapse all its incredible dimensions into a single, outdated function.
And the exact same collapsing happens with sorting systems. To commit to the totally parameter, to truly understand a system, you cannot collapse its historical, structural, and administrative dimensions into a single lazy label like, well, that's just the way things naturally are.
You can't just look at the disparate graduation rates and say, well, some kids are just smarter. That is collapsing the dimension.
Yes. To practice totally, you have to close your psychological escape routes. You have to face the absolute totality of the architecture. You have to acknowledge the uncomfortable truth that a system can be administratively real. It can have real forms, real buildings, and real budgets without being ontologically deep or morally correct. A system can distribute immense, life-altering consequences while remaining historically contingent and deeply morally distorted.
So we've covered the visual flaws, the blueprint of categories, and the massive external sorting systems. What does this all mean for how you and I actually operate on a random Tuesday? Because we are interpreting the world constantly. We can't stop interpreting.
We can't stop, but we must understand what interpretation actually is. Here, we encounter one of the most radical claims of this entire architecture. Interpretation is not a decorative preface to action.
It's not just a thought that happens before the real stuff begins.
No. Interpretation is action in seed form. This brings us to the terrifying concept of the autocorrective reality. When you interpret an event, you are not passively sitting in an audience observing a play. You are actively prearranging the conditions under which your interpretation will later appear, even to yourself, to be absolutely correct.
I want to walk through the municipal bureaucracy example to illustrate this because it makes this recursive, self-fulfilling loop so visible. Let's imagine a city bureaucracy. Maybe a police department, a city council, or neighborhood watch. And this bureaucracy, using its inherited maps, interprets a specific population or a specific neighborhood as suspicious or high crime.
That initial interpretation suspicion acts as a seed, and that seed mechanically leads to a very specific material action.
Right.
Increased surveillance, the bureaucracy allocates more monitors, conducts more audits, installs more cameras, and places a heavier police presence in that specific targeted area.
Right. And what is the mechanical, inevitable result of increased surveillance? Simply by virtue of the fact that more eyes and cameras are actively watching, the threshold for what gets documented drops significantly. If you stare at anything long enough, you will find infractions. So the surveillance inevitably produces a higher number of recorded incidents. Minor infractions that would be ignored in another neighborhood are officially logged.
Exactly. And what happens to those newly recorded incidents? They are fed directly back into the bureaucracy's database. The statistics rise, and then at the end of the year, the bureaucracy looks at its own database, points to the high numbers, and says, see, we were absolutely right to be suspicious. Look at all this objective data.
Interpretation literally becomes infrastructure. The infrastructure manufactures the exact evidence it needs to feed the original interpretation. The loop closes seamlessly, and the terrifying part is that the people inside the bureaucracy genuinely, honestly believe they are just neutrally responding to objective data. They don't realize they authored the data.
This recursive loop is exactly why we must map this back to the final piece of the 4DP framework. The target parameter. In this architecture, your target is your aim, your directional pull, your ultimate intent. But the framework heavily favors flexible aims over rigid plans.
Why is that? Why not have a strict step-by-step plan?
Because every single category you use, every interpretation you make, carries what we can call a silent thesis, a hidden directional pull. If your target is unconscious or unexamined, your interpretations act as blind, chaotic arrows. They create these recursive loops that often manufacture the exact reality you are most afraid of.
Can you give a personal example of a silent thesis creating a loop?
Think about interpersonal relationships. Let's say a person has an unconscious target of intense self-protection because of past trauma. Because their target is self-protection, their internal category for ambiguous social behavior is threat. Therefore, when a colleague makes a neutral, perhaps slightly awkward comment, the person's category distributes attention to the awkwardness, infers malice, and interprets the comment as a personal attack.
And because interpretation is action in seed form, how do they act?
They act defensively, they snap back, or they withdraw coldly. What is the material translation of that action? The colleague feels alienated and pulls away.
Oh, I see it.
And then the original person looks at the colleague pulling away and says, see, I knew they were against me. I was right to protect myself. The unconscious target manufactured the isolation it feared.
Wow. So setting a highly conscious target breaks that autocorrect loop. It forces you to pause the machinery and say, wait, is my interpretation of this comment actually moving me toward my conscious goal of building a good working relationship? Or is it just blindly feeding an old inherited map of fear?
Precisely. A conscious target acts as a circuit breaker for the autocorrective reality.
Which brings us really to the culmination of all this source material. We've talked about these incredible cognitive mechanisms, but why does prejudice, why does the systemic sorting of human beings persist so stubbornly? Why is it that concepts like racism, caste systems, and extreme class contempt survive generation after generation, even after their scientific, biological, or moral logic has been entirely publicly and repeatedly debunked?
That is the ultimate question. And the answer is that we have been using too small a frame. We tend to think of these issues purely as matters of individual prejudice, as bad feelings inside a person's heart. But prejudice alone fails to explain the durability of inequality. These systems persist because of the architecture.
There is a massive distinction drawn here that I want to highlight. Bias bends perception, but architecture bends life.
That is the crux of the matter. A biased person might cross the street to avoid walking near someone of a different phenotype. That is an individual failure of perception. But a sorting system determines which streets get paved, which streets have streetlights, and which streets are bulldozed to build a highway.
A biased person might deny someone warmth, eye contact, or dignity in a one-on-one conversation, but a sorting system denies them credit approval, housing loans equals schooling, generational inheritance, and upward mobility.
Racism and caste systems are not just isolated, irrational hatreds floating around in a vacuum. They are convergence points. They are the ultimate indicators of a much deeper failure in how our species makes meaning. They represent the culmination of everything we have unpacked today. Arrogant visual overconfidence, massive category inflation, the brute force of administrative repetition, and the devastating conversion of a surface phenotype into a permanent, inescapable verdict.
It really is the architectural embarrassment of our species. Think about the profound contradiction we live in. We are a technologically dazzling society. We have built invisible wireless networks that encircle the globe. We have orbital instruments taking photographs of the birth of galaxies. We have artificial intelligence translating languages in real time.
We possess godlike technological infrastructure, yet simultaneously we are still aggressively staging primitive tribal disputes over inherited social hierarchies. We are trying to navigate a quantum age world using deeply corrupted primitive Bronze Age meaning maps to sort human beings.
Yeah.
We have proven that profound intelligence in tool-making does not automatically guarantee even a baseline level of wisdom in meaning-making.
So knowing all this, how do we use the 4DP and linear reality deduction to actually stop doing this? How do we build better architecture in our own individual lives? I want to lighten this heavy philosophical load for just a second with a very practical, almost funny application,
Okay.
because it perfectly illustrates what happens when you try to force these architectural parameters without respecting actual reality. Let's talk about the IKEA bookshelf.
Let's unpack the bookshelf.
Okay, so imagine you go to the store and you buy a large, complex IKEA bookshelf. You bring the flat boxes home. You decide you are going to perfectly embody the target parameter. You declare to the room, I am an integrated builder. My conscious target is to construct this shelf beautifully. You are forcing a positive conscious target.
A noble goal.
But in your enthusiasm for your target, you completely ignore the truth of your physical environment, what the framework calls the delineator. You ignore the fact that the paper instructions are torn, they make absolutely no sense, and you are literally missing 4 crucial wooden dowels.
And here is where linear reality deduction applies. You cannot build a physical wooden shelf just by chanting a positive psychological mantra about being a builder. The concept, the abstraction of your positive intent, possesses no independent physical force. It utterly fails the meteor test.
The reality of the missing dowels, the hard material constraint, crushes the psychological fantasy.
Exactly. You must respect the truth parameter. You have to radically and honestly map the physical reality like, I am missing pieces, before your target means anything at all. A good target cannot bypass a physical deficit.
And the other example is the traffic jam. This one happens to me constantly. You're driving home and you get stuck in absolute bumper-to-bumper gridlock. You decide you're going to practice the 40P. You're going to hold your title lightly. You say to yourself, I am not an angry, stressed commuter. I am fluid. I am one with the traffic. I am yielding to the flow of the universe. You have entered full, enlightened Zen mode.
You are projecting peace.
I am the Buddha of the highway. And then, out of nowhere, a massive BMW cuts you off, missing your bumper by an inch, completely without using a blinker. Instantly, your fabricated Zen mode shatters into a million pieces. Your heart spikes, you roll down the window, and you scream at the top of your lungs at them.
Why does that happen? Why did the peace evaporate instantly?
Because the BMW acted as a threshold guardian. It revealed that your totally parameter was completely missing. You weren't totally structurally committed to peace. You were using the framework of Zen mode merely as a psychological escape route to avoid feeling the very real, uncomfortable frustration of being trapped in traffic.
I was performing surrender just to bypass my own anger.
Exactly. And the moment material reality aggressively challenged you, the moment the BMW swerved, your ego abandoned the performance and snapped violently back to its default recursive loop of anger.
You can't just shout, I am the storm, at traffic. The architecture of your internal meaning has to be robust enough to handle the actual friction of reality without instantly collapsing into a recursive reaction. You have to actually run the protocol.
Right.
Catch the spike of anger, name the category that just fired, locate the missing physical dowel or the missing blinker, and consciously adjust your internal code rather than just reacting to it.
So if we synthesize all of this, from the failure of visual epistemology to the invisible blueprints of categories to the immense weight of sorting systems and auto-correcting loops, what does this all ultimately mean for the listener?
It means you now have the tools. You have linear reality deduction. The next time you are in an argument or you are watching the news or you are judging a stranger and you feel a truth is just obvious, you can stop. You can trace the visible door back to the invisible frame and trace the frame back to the societal blueprint.
Exactly.
You can ask yourself, is this my actual ground level perception, or is this just an inherited map running on autopilot? Is this an objective fact, or is it an autocorrect loop manufactured by years of administrative repetition? And you can use the 4 parameters to actively rewrite your own internal software. Target. Set conscious, flexible aims so you don't become a victim of your own silent thesis. Truth. Demand radical self-honesty about the material reality of your situation, missing dowels and all. Totally. Close your psychological escape routes and commit to dimensional homonymy. Stop collapsing complex realities into flat labels. Title: Hold your noun ships lightly. Refuse to let your temporary roles harden into permanent, rigid prisons for yourself or for anyone else.
To wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with one final provocative thought. Something for you to deeply mull over as you go about your day, building on everything we've discussed, but zooming out even further.
In the companion text surrounding this framework, specifically regarding the common structure of priority, there's a profound observation about how worlds are actually built. We often think of society, or our own lives, as being built entirely from tangible things, from laws, from concrete, from physical labor, and from stated beliefs. But the text argues something more subtle. It argues that society is built from sequence.
Sequence. Ordered seriousness. The literal order of what comes first, what comes second, and what is delayed.
Exactly. We often treat priority as just a sterile managerial buzzword used in corporate meetings. But priority is actually value translated into mechanism. The text makes a devastatingly clear statement. A society is built by what it repeatedly permits to come first.
Think about that in the context of everything we've discussed. A chronically neglected school system, a preventable delay in medical care for a specific demographic, an under-repaired neighborhood.
These are not just unfortunate, passive accidents or natural phenomena. They are the clear, undeniable architectural evidence of what the governing order was persistently willing to place later in the sequence. They are the material translation of a delayed priority.
What it repeatedly permitted to wait. I want to turn this concept directly to you, the listener, right now. Take this profound concept of sequence and apply it to the microarchitecture of your own life. Look at your actual daily schedule. Look closely at where your time, your money, and your cognitive energy actually go, not where you verbally claim they go.
Ask yourself, what are you repeatedly permitting to come first?
Because whatever that sequence is, whether it's checking your phone before speaking to your partner, or prioritizing comfort over truth, it is not just a schedule. It is the silent, ongoing construction project of your reality. Your sequence is building the architecture of your entire world.
Priority is simply the blueprint made durable through time.
It brings us right back to the beginning of our conversation. We really like the clean X-ray. We like to think our priorities, our categories, and our visual judgments are just objective, mechanical readouts of a simple world. But the waters are muddy. The machine making the diagnosis is the human mind itself, full of inherited maps and hidden theses. But you are no longer blind to the machine. You have the tools to clear the water. You can rigorously interrogate those inherited maps. You can aggressively challenge the illusion of obviousness. So look at your blueprints, check your sequence, and keep diving deep.